koutou katoa, nā mai haere mai ki te hui o te Committee Ratonga Rangatopu me te Rautaki, the Policy, Finance and Strategy Committee, e tēnei rā. Welcome everybody to today's meeting of the Policy, Finance and Strategy Committee. Our emergency procedures are up on the screen for those of you who are visiting today. If you're feeling unwell, please do not come to the meeting. It can be watched live on Council's website, and people can submit to us through Zoom as well. In the event of a fire, there are 2 exits from the chambers, and our officers will guide you. We will hopefully know what to do in an earthquake. And finally, can I ask that all mobile phones please be switched to silent mode? A reminder for members to use their microphones because this meeting is being live streamed. Up on the screen now, we have our opening karakia timatanga, and I invite you to join me in reciting this one. Me karakia tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. He hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei Māori ora. That moves us into apologies. I believe we have an apology from Mayor Barry for lateness. He may be joining us online or for his absence from the meeting. Are there any other apologies? Nobody has to leave early? No, we can deal with that if it arises. So I move from Mayor Barry. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Lewis. I now put the motion, which has been moved in second. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say no. I declare that motion carried. Okay, our first order of business today is hearing of public submissions on the control of alcohol in public places bylaw. We have had written submissions from these people included in your agendas today, and to our guests who have come to submit in person, please do take your submissions as read, but we welcome you to speak to your submissions. You'll have 5 minutes each. That includes time for any questions elected members might have about your submission. If you could leave time for questions, that would be great. So first up, I'd like to welcome Inspector Sean Lingard from New Zealand Police to come forward to the table and make his submission. Kia ora, Sean. And there's a button, the right-hand button on that microphone there will turn you on so we can all hear. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone, I hope you can hear me all right. My name is Inspector Sean Lingard. I'm the Area Prevention Manager for Te Awa Kairangi Hutt Valley Police. Thanks for having me here today. I will go through this as quickly as concisely as I can. Most of you will be aware we've got a broader philosophy in policing that is community policing orientated. We always support locally generated solutions to crime disorder problems within our community, and that includes the introduction of any alcohol-related bylaws. In this context, we strongly see ourselves as supporting the community to address efforts to reduce alcohol harm within the community and at a community level. With that said, we are the designated enforcement agency. We have an obligation to enforce such bylaws, and we take the same operational approach with alcohol-related bylaws as we would with any other procedural justice or regulatory offences. With that said, that means we use discretion, which is a key part of policing in New Zealand. That means we won't have a strict compliance with any alcohol-related bylaw. We look at time, place, circumstances with an overarching purpose of trying to ensure that we reduce alcohol-related harm. With the proposals, specifically the local alcohol policy or the LAP, we don't make any submission in relation to that, but we do support the continuation of the current off-licence caps and the trading hours. More specifically and pertinent for us is the control of alcohol public places bylaw. Please strongly support and submit that the alcohol-free zones listed in the previous alcohol bylaws should be reinstated. That goes from alcohol-free zone 1 through to 15. I will make comment that alcohol-free zones 1, 2 and 3 are largely inconsequential to police at least. They are small car parks or small areas, I would suggest probably came about by the rallying of a neighbourhood as opposed from police. The rest of the alcohol-free zones are much more consequential to us. Batoni, Wainuiomata, Stokes Valley, Lower Hutt Central, Taita, Nainai. These are all CBDs, shopping centres, shopping hubs, suburban areas. Seaview and Eastbourne on top of that as well, I'd probably deem as recreational areas where people go and park up perhaps and maybe drink alcohol to look at the great views across the sea. What I will put particular emphasis on in my submission is the alcohol-free zone 15, which is the citywide alcohol-free zone. And I will talk to that in more depth. I'll try and be as quick as possible. But we don't make any submission for the introduction of any new 24-hour alcohol-free zones. I know there was some interest from various parties around Waterloo and perhaps Mauira. I have not made those submissions. I think it would be difficult to perhaps get the data without neglecting other similar suburbs. What I would stress, though, is the alcohol-free zone, the citywide alcohol-free zone, would serve most of the purposes there and would get greater bang for buck, let's say, and would focus on all suburbs across Lower Hutt. The alcohol-free zone citywide one, if you weren't aware, was 2100 to I think it's 0500 hours. So it's a night time, essentially. I will come back to that in a second. Specifically to Proposal 1, police support the extended alcohol-free zone in Waimata to Hutt. But extensive Waimata seems logical, and to also include the car parking off Te Atarokura, which is a thoroughfare now to Hugh Sinclair Park. We also support the extension of the Lower Hutt CBD alcohol-free zone into Raroa Road along High Street. Again, this is a logical extension and covers off some off-licences within the CBD. Proposal 2 is the ability for the council to install temporary alcohol-free zones. We strongly support this. Lower Hutt hosts many large events. Particularly, I will reference Juicy Fest 2024. That is happening again in 2025 in January. And maybe I'm premature here, but 660 in March in 2025. We know in 2024, Juicy Fest came with a significant amount of alcohol harm related issues. We can only partly mitigate issues like that with a temporary alcohol ban outside the venue. In 2024, we weren't able to do that. So from a police perspective, Juicy Fest was not overly successful from our point of view. However, we think it can be more successful with temporary liquor bans. So we submit that the council has the ability to make a temporary liquor ban in any public place, and there be a mechanism for police or other agencies to apply for or ask for a temporary liquor ban for large public events. I will make comments with the Lower Hutt CBD. I'm not making any submission here, but I do question whether there has been thought to extending the alcohol-free zone in the CBD here to extend and cover the Riverlink project. I can't say I'm an expert in that, but I understand there will be some more green spaces, public spaces. It has been thought to extending the CBD to future-proof. And finally, I will just touch on the alcohol-free zone, the citywide alcohol-free zone, AFZ 15. This is most important to police. It is common knowledge in most CBDs, particularly Lower Hutt here, Nainai, Taita or Stokes Valley, that there will be some kind of alcohol prohibition or an alcohol-free zone. That's generally common sense. What is not well known is the citywide alcohol-free zone. I understand it's been in for a number of years, but barely anyone knows about it. It's certainly not enforced. If I take a dip sample of police, they don't know about it. Some of my sergeants that have been there a long time, they know about it, but don't believe we can enforce it, and as such, we don't enforce it. It is a defence to consume or have alcohol in an alcohol-free zone if it's in reasonable circumstances that person didn't know it was an alcohol-free zone. What I would strongly submit is that all the alcohol-free zones, including the citywide alcohol-free zone, has extensive signage, and perhaps, especially with the citywide alcohol-free zone, has some kind of PR or communication strategy. That takes away or aids us in being able to enforce it, because then we can say that, yes, hey, it is reasonable that this person knows or should have known. Alcohol-free zones have been particularly successful. I use a case study very quickly on Kapiti Mana on the Kapiti Coast. They implemented alcohol-free zone in 2012, a 39.4% decrease in drunken detox, violence and disorder events in those alcohol-free zones. Not only is it an extremely good enforcement tool, but it's also a concept that promotes a culture of change towards responsible drinking in managed environments, and that's using the alcohol-free zone's positive messaging. So very quickly in summation, All alcohol-free zones in the previous bylaw are reinstated, including the citywide alcohol-free zone, a greater signage in all alcohol-free zones, and a strong communications or public relations campaign in relation to all the alcohol-free zones, and particularly alcohol-free zone 15 citywide. Te Ata Raukura and surrounding car parks are included. AFZ 12, the extension of Lower Hutt CBD to include the streets named in the proposal, and Hutt City Council to have the power to install a temporary alcohol-free zone in relation to a large-scale public event. Thank you. Sorry, it's probably longer than it should have been.
That's okay, Sean. You're a bit over 5 minutes, but I think it's important that we have some questions for you as well. If any members have questions, Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. In your submission and the words you just spoke, you talked about Waterloo and Moera being considered as new alcohol-free zones, but ultimately did not make a submission for their inclusion because it was difficult to obtain the data. We've been supplied with the data from the Police National Alcohol Harm View database comparing alcohol-related crime and disorder occurrences across suburbs, and that does show quite a big issue in Waterloo and Moera. Just wondering if you have got any commentary about that. Are these all occurring outside of in the evening, in which case the 24-hour ban would have no impact? Yeah, up on the screen there. Yeah, so the top set of bars and the second one down is Waterloo at the top, and then Moera is the second one down. Just keen to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I would say, firstly, anecdotally, Waterloo and Moera don't jump out to police. They aren't two suburbs that we have high rates of crime, anecdotally. If I look at the data I do have in front of me, though, again, I would say Waterloo and Moera don't necessarily jump off the page. If I take, for example, the total occurrences that have alcohol as a contributing factor, Moera sits at 21%, Waterloo at 17%. If I look at other suburbs, Avalon, for example, 21%, Ipuni, 19%, Seaview, 28%, Days Bay, for example, 19%. So they certainly just don't jump off the page to me, and I can't split the offending between daytime and nighttime. I haven't got that data, but I do think a nighttime alcohol-free zone would largely you can't solve the problem, but serve a purpose there.
Just in terms of things not jumping off the page, Sean, this page up on the screen here is alcohol-related crime and disorder occurrences across suburbs from the police database. Waterloo's up top and Moira's second, 898 occurrences in Moira. That's more than Nainai, about 2 or 3 times higher than Taita, a lot higher than Eastbourne, where we're continuing to have the 24/7 ban there. So I was just curious, and certainly I represent the part of Lower Hutt that includes Waterloo, and I've had a lot of concern from residents down there about public drinking during the daytime, not overnight, during the daytime. So I just wondered if you could comment on this particular data in front of us. Are those high number of occurrences in Moira in particular, but Waterloo's pretty high as well. Are they of concern, and would it help you to have liquor exclusion zones 24/7 in those two areas?
If I look at Moira, I think what we see there is a higher level of deprivation and a lot of concentration of social housing. So part of what makes up alcohol-related harm, a large chunk of that is family harm, which doesn't necessarily happen out in public places. So I mean, look, sure, there can be an argument made either way. I'm obviously not making a submission, but I'm not saying it wouldn't have some benefit. I think we don't have a glaring problem within police about Moira or Waterloo. I would say Waterloo has and will be increasing in terms of its transport hub. So there is going to be a lot of pedestrian foot traffic through there, and we know that it's residentially the population will increase in there. So I mean, anecdotally, you could say that there will potentially be an increase of alcohol-related incidents in the public because of the general increase in population, but it's certainly not something that is jumping out to us currently or that we have a particular problem with in that location.
Thank you. And the only other question I had was about signage because you raised it. And we do have some, probably quite old now, to be honest, signs around the city. Do you have any issue with the content of the signs, or is it more to do with the placement and number of them?
No, it's not the content, it's just the placement and the number. Look, I haven't gone out there and done a thorough examination of each one, but from what I've seen, I think there was maybe one or two in Nainai, which is quite a large area. I don't think there were many in Stokes Valley either. But the point is there needs to be better signage, and perhaps in the main carriageway where you drive into, say, for example, Nainai and High Street, a big, large sign. I just think the signage is inadequate.
Thank you very much. We'll take that on board. I can't see any more questions for you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Edwards has one.
Yep, thanks, Sean. Could you speak a little bit more about discretion? Like one of the submissions to us said 9 p.m. for the blanket ban across the cities, you know, a glass of bubbly while you're watching the sun go down. That seems a bit too early. And someone else in another submission talking about a quiet family picnic. That's not the kind of thing you're interested in. You're interested in noisy, yes, maybe slightly larger gatherings, broken glass.
Yeah, I mean, look, if I'm speaking frankly, we're not interested in that low-level type of stuff. What we're interested in is the abuse of alcohol that's going to lead to some kind of criminal offending or social harm. And I don't think that someone having a beer while they're watching a sport or rugby or whatever it might be is going to lead to that. It doesn't. What we're talking about is if we're responding to a fight in the street and it's clearly fueled by alcohol, those are the type of things we're looking at.
And could you just remind us, you obviously, in circumstances where you're going to enforce it, there's confiscation of the alcohol. Is there any other actions taken?
It's a $250 infringement fee, and we confiscate the alcohol. If someone refuses to give us the alcohol or tip it out, we can arrest them, but there's no criminal charge. They are only released with a fine. So the maximum is a $250 fine.
Okay, Sean, looks like we're done. Thank you so much for your submission and the points you've made today.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is joining us via Zoom, Jennifer Lamb, representing Alcohol Watch. Kia ora, Jennifer, and we've got someone else with you. Feel free to introduce them too. We'll give you 5 minutes as well. Councillors, this written submission is on page 18 of your agendas. Kia ora, Jennifer.
Oh, well, kia ora. I'm going to pass over to Andrew Galloway, the Executive Director here at Alcohol Health Watch.
Tēnā koutou katoa. As Jennifer said, I'm Andrew Galloway, the Executive Director here at Alcohol Health Watch, and joined by my wonderful colleague Jennifer Lamb, who does most of the work in the local government space. Alcohol Health Watch, if you didn't know, we're a national organisation funded by Health New Zealand, Te Whatu Ora, to provide credible, up-to-date evidence and advice regarding alcohol policy and planning matters. We coordinate networks such as the Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Roku and the Cross-Council Alcohol Policy Network, and other networks and projects that support the alcohol harm reduction sector. It's worthy to note, when we're looking at alcohol policy, of all drugs available in our society, alcohol is the most harmful. Alcohol is the leading cause of preventable death, injury and ill health in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a significant contributor to the social and health inequities experienced by Māori, Pacific and other impacted groups. Alcohol is a component cause for more than 200 disease and injury conditions, and the leading behavioural risk factor for death and disability adjusted life years lost among New Zealanders aged 15 to 49. The cost of alcohol harm in Aotearoa has been estimated at over a staggering $9.1 billion annually. The harms are far-reaching and felt deeply by many families and communities. The council and the police, who we've just heard from, licensing inspectors, the medical officers of health and other communities, groups and agencies such as our own are well aware of the impact alcohol and the significant burden that alcohol places on communities such as Hutt City, in fact the whole region and nationally. And what evidence there is likely an underestimate of the total burden of disease, particularly affecting vulnerable groups. When we look at alcohol-free zones, our written submission outlined the evidence for alcohol-free zones and why the making of a new control of alcohol in public places bylaw is really important for those who live, work and play in the city and those who visit. Alcohol-free zones can help reduce crime and disorder in a location of concern and help denormalise alcohol use generally. They are a cost-effective measure given the damage and harm associated with crime, injury, vandalism, impacting often council assets and programs with the resulting underutilisation of public places. The Local Government Act sets out the criteria for making a control of alcohol bylaw, and it is clear that there continues to be a problem with alcohol in certain areas of Hutt City with crime or disorder, made worse by alcohol consumption in those areas if they were not alcohol-free zones. A bylaw is an appropriate, proportionate and reasonable way of addressing that problem, and it is not inconsistent with the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990. The bylaw has the same or substantially the same effect as the 2016 alcohol bylaw. Alcohol Health Watch supports the review of the 2016 bylaw and its replacement that continues most of the provisions of the earlier bylaw and adjusts town centre boundaries and extends some others, for example, Wainuiomata and Lower Hutt CBD. We see the control of alcohol bylaw in public places as part of a cohesive package of measures to reduce alcohol-related harm. In this regard, we are pleased to see the comprehensive approach of this council, not only in reviewing and replacing the 2016 bylaw, but also making an alcohol fees bylaw, as well as reviewing the council's local alcohol policy. Alcohol control bylaws not only leverage off those measures, but also support community safety and wellbeing initiatives. In summary, Alcohol Health Watch support the proposals that would confirm the areas of concern in the 2016 bylaw and add additional protections based on updated evidence. That's proposal 1. And the need for flexibility for events by imposing temporary alcohol-free zones as in proposal 2 under certain conditions. Thank you, committee, for your attention, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anyone have any questions? I'll ask you one, Andrew, because we talked with the previous speaker about a couple of areas which haven't been proposed but have been discussed by our community, which currently aren't alcohol-free zones. And I think the answer from the police is that they may not need them to be alcohol-free zones as much as they may do some other places in Lower Hutt. But I just wondered what your opinion was on that. These are shopping centres in Lower Hutt, where certainly anecdotally there are people drinking in public during the day. So what would you like to see in areas like those in regards to alcohol-free zones, signage and enforcement?
It's a good question, great question. And I bring experience from working at Auckland Council as a manager of community safety a few years ago. It's always better to have an alcohol control bylaw and not need it than to need it and not have it. And the where people choose to drink can change over time with events or other things that will change patterns of drinking behaviour. So in my view, it's if you've got evidence to support it, it would be better to have it and potentially not need it than to need it and not have it, because when you have a problem and no bylaw, that becomes an ongoing issue with a longer fix. Any comments, Jennifer?
No, I think except you asked a question about signage, and I think that's quite important to keep people informed of where they are, because a lot of people don't know. And I don't know, in smoke-free, for example, they say, welcome to the smoke-free zone. And it sounds better than a ban, but yeah, I think as long as people are informed.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? No. Tēnā kōrua, thank you very much for your submission and answering our questions today. I'd now like to invite George Leipold, Healthy Families Hutt Valley Practice Lead, to come forward and make his submission, which is on page 25 of your agendas. Kia ora, George.
Kia ora koutou, ko George Toko Wingawa. I'm the Healthy Families Hutt Valley Practice Lead, and I'm here to speak to our submission. Council's vision, ko te tātou he wahi whai hua ki hona tangata, our city where everyone thrives. In the long-term plan, our mayor speaks to his statement. We want to do more to ensure that our city is a place where everyone can thrive. On page 23 of the plan, te matapono, promoting the well-being of all people. For Lower Hutt to thrive, neighbourhoods and communities need to be safe, connected, healthy, inclusive and resilient. On page 117 of the plan, oranga hapori me te ahuria, social and cultural well-being. We want neighbourhoods and communities that are safe, connected, healthy, inclusive and resilient. Healthy Families Hutt Valley submission is a reflection of the work that we have done with our communities and the insights we have gathered from our communities. Collectively, we have asked for the following places to be designated alcohol-free zones. Our parks, including skate parks, sports grounds, the associated car parking areas, changing room facilities, and special references made to Frederick Wise Park, acknowledging Wānui Mata Rugby League who have been advocating for this space for a number of years. Currently, we have 8 of the 28 parks alcohol-free zones. We're asking for council outdoor sports courts and changing facilities to be alcohol-free zones, our playgrounds, council swimming pool area and complexes, our bus shelters, our bus stops, train stations, our beaches, outdoor public areas around council buildings and council-run and funded events, and finally, our school drop-off areas. We're asking for this to create a healthier, safer environment for our tamariki, our rangatahi and our community. We're asking for this to denormalise the spaces where alcohol is seen and consumed, and removing it from the places where our children, our young people and our families move through our city and our community. We're asking for this to move alcohol back into club rooms, putting it in a space where it is controlled, minimising the risk of the alcohol-fuelled antisocial sideline behaviour that we've witnessed recently. What we are asking is not new. Our council have already designated these areas smoke-free, vape-free in our smoke-free outdoor public places policy, with the exception of the school drop-off areas. Christchurch City Council started to pave the way in the alcohol space in 2019, and Auckland City Council have adopted a similar approach with parks in 2023. Healthy Families Hutt Valley are asking for council to show their commitment to a safe, connected, healthy, inclusive and resilient city through the submissions we have made today and those who have spoken before me. Ko te tātou he wahi whai hua ki hona tangata, our city where everyone thrives. Kia ora.
Kia ora, George. Anybody have any questions for George? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, George. Thank you for the mahi. Thank you for the korero. My question is going to be an interesting one. I haven't fully thought it through myself. We currently have an alcohol ban from 9 till 5 citywide. With the list of things that you've put in there, I'm struggling to see areas that you wouldn't want to see covered by the alcohol ban. So is that what you're asking for? Really, in summary, would it be easier to put alcohol-free for 24 hours a day for the whole of the city?
No, we're stating those areas specifically because these are the areas where our public move through. These are areas, the sports fields as an example, are areas where alcohol-fuelled incidents have occurred. We not so long ago had the grand final at the Hutt Rec, and it ended up being surrounded by police because of the fighting on the sideline that was alcohol-fuelled as a result. Our drive is to actually create a safer environment for our families who come to these events and be a part of it, and to ensure that they are safe in that space when they're moving through it. The areas of smoke-free that I've identified in terms of the smoke-free areas are just a natural progression in relation to creating them as alcohol-free zones.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, just got one on the Frederick Wise Park. You said that for the past 4 years, Wānui Rugby League have been advocating for the area to be designated alcohol-free. Do you know if they made a submission as part of this process? Or have they
I
kind of
believe
done
they
that?
haven't. From my contact with them, one of the issues that arose through the submission process was, I suppose, the wording, and I'll just grab this. Clear. You probably, and this is partly highlighted in our proposal. We sent it out to 83 sports organisations, and the feedback from some of them were, we're not promising to make any major changes to the current rules, but we want to hear from you. The feedback from some of our people has been, what's the point? Because in their eyes, there is a preconceived assumption that the decision's already been made and no other alterations will take place as a result of the process we're going through now. So that's come from a number of sports organisations and people we've connected with in the community. So yeah, I believe that they haven't made a submission.
But you have spoke specifically with the Wānui Mata Rugby League and they would support extending it over the whole of the park. Cool, thank you.
At the moment, Wānui Mata Rugby League designate that field alcohol-free zone and manage it as best as they can without the support of a bylaw.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, George. Good submission. In Wainuiomata, you've highlighted bus stops as well. What's your reasoning there? Which examples?
Sorry, what we're seeing at the moment is that periodically you're seeing alcohol cases in bus stops. They are also spaces where people can become at risk or just through the presence of walking through those areas or being in those areas, highlighting in some other suburbs or regions outside of Wellington that they are high-risk areas for our community. Yeah. So it's, for us, it's about actually keeping those areas safe. Good.
Okay, thank you, George. I can't see any more questions. Thank you so much for your submission and to your colleagues for coming in to support you today. And as has been mentioned, for all the mahi you do with our communities. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Now, we do have Bruce Spedding down for public comment, but I can't see Bruce in the meeting, in the room or online. So I think we're going to have to move on without Bruce, but councillors have certainly seen his written submission. So I'd just like to thank all the submitters today for taking their time to join us and to make their views heard. And we're now going to continue with the ordinary business of this meeting, and we will conduct a deliberation on the hearing of submissions in private at the end of the meeting. So we'll go through the other papers in our agenda first, and then we'll break for deliberations in private on this particular hearing. Okay, so item number 4 is public comment for the regular meeting, but we don't have anyone registered to speak there. Item number 5 is conflict of interest declarations. Does any member have a conflict of interest to declare? Yes, Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. Interest for the, sorry, mental blank as to which number it is, the vocational training feedback to central government, given that I'm employed by a
Oops. Yes, thank you for your declaration. Okay, we'll move forward to item number 6. We are going to work just through the paper itself about the control of alcohol in public places bylaw. It's on page 8 of the agenda. I'll invite Angela Gordon, Senior Policy Advisor, to come and speak to that paper. Just a reminder, we'll be holding deliberations later in the meeting.
Good afternoon. So we're considering the draft. Oh, sorry. So we're considering the draft control of alcohol in public places bylaw. I'll just go over the purpose of the bylaw first. So as you know, it outlines the alcohol-free zones across Lower Hutt. And to propose an area as an alcohol-free zone, legislation requires evidence of high level of crime or disorder that's caused or made worse by alcohol consumption. Evidence is sourced from the local police, the National Alcohol Harm Viewer Database, the Hutt City Council CCTV camera team, and Health New Zealand. And you've heard directly from the Lower Hutt Police already, so I won't comment on that. But public consultation on the draft bylaw took place from the 25th of July to the 26th of August. We received 24 responses, 18 from the online survey and 6 written submissions. The public consultation focused on 3 different areas. The first one were minor updates for the alcohol-free zones in Wainuiomata and Lower Hutt CBD. Just over half of respondents either agreed or strongly agreed with the proposed minor update in Wainuiomata, and nearly 2/3 agreed that the car parks on either side of that updated area along Te Ararakura should be included. Just over half either agreed or strongly agreed with the proposed minor update in the Lower Hutt CBD. The second question we asked the public was for their support for the CE in consultation with the mayor and committee chairs to impose temporary alcohol-free zones. And nearly 3/4 of respondents agreed or strongly agreed with that proposal. The public were also asked to propose other areas as potential alcohol-free zones, and very few suggestions were received. 3 submitted suggested changes to the alcohol-free zone in Eastbourne. One suggestion made was to extend the alcohol-free zone in Wainuiomata to include Frederick Wise Park including the car park, playground, and basketball court. One suggestion also was to extend the Lower Hutt CBD areas to include Riverlink and Melling interchange project areas. A draft bylaw and a copy of the statement of proposal have been attached to the report to support your deliberations. Following your deliberations, any updates to the draft bylaw will be made for council to consider on the 1st of October. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Just in terms to those submissions from the public suggesting other areas, do officers have a view on those particular areas, Burdens Gate, Frederick Wise Park, Riverlink?
So, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand your question.
Do officers have a view on whether we should accept those recommendations from members of the public?
I don't have particular evidence about any particular crime or disorder happening in those areas. I could look into the Frederick Wise Park area, for example, but the Riverlink and Melling interchange projects, I think, was kind of a future-looking proposal. So I don't know that currently I'd be able to satisfy that legislative requirement.
Thank you. And I was going to ask for the benefit of the public commenters, but they've already left. But I'll ask this question anyway, because we discussed this earlier in the piece about that requirement for evidence. There was a suggestion from Healthy Families of alcohol-free, lots of public places, parks and bus stops and all kinds of. Can you remind us what the evidential requirement is for establishing alcohol-free zones?
It's rather vague wording, unfortunately, and it basically says that, exactly as I had described, that we have to show evidence that there is a high level of crime and disorder that is caused or made worse by alcohol consumption. That's what it says. So we can kind of define it for ourselves, I believe.
But in terms of blanket areas, because I think I asked you guys a while back about like every sports ground in Lower Hutt, if there's not evidence of alcohol-related crime in a particular sports ground, then there's no evidence base, then there's no, we can't just add one there, can we?
Technically, no. Yeah.
Any further questions for Angela on the paper here? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Angela. The submission that came in from, who we just heard from, the Alcohol Health Watch, and they've mentioned in their bullet point 2, environmental or neighbourhood disorder. Does that rank in the requirements legally? You just said disorder. Like harm is neighbourhood harm, like disorder in a neighbourhood, is that harmful? Is that something that would qualify? That's what I'm trying to seek.
Yes, I think all of it. But when I asked for data for Lower Hutt, for example, I focused on the alcohol-free zones. It will pinpoint exactly where the harm is actually happening. If there are some areas of concern, that is another way that we can gather some evidence. But I don't have anything to offer.
And just one more question for me, and it is about Riverlink, because that was a good suggestion, I think, but it was very much looking to the future. So presumably we don't have a current evidence base. I don't know if Mr. Cato can comment on that one, whether the legislation allows us to kind of preemptively create any alcohol-free zones, or are we unable to do that without existing evidence?
No, it's definitely existing. So it says, yeah, there is evidence that the area has experienced a high level of crime and disorder that can be shown to have caused or made worse by alcohol consumption in the area. So yeah, it's looking backwards. So you're reacting to a problem, basically.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, are there any further questions? If not, I'm going to move the motion, or some of the recommendations at least, because we are yet to deliberate, but I will move the first 4 recommendations in the paper because they're all noting and accepting, noting that consultation ran from 26th of July to 25th of August, accepting a late submission from the National Council of Women in New Zealand, noting copies of 4 written submissions from respondents, who are the ones who came to speak to us today, and noting the complete set of submissions received via the survey and email attached as Appendix 2. Mawai e tautoko. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Stallinger. Is there any debate just on noting and accepting those things? No. In that case, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Ka whakapuaki au kua mana te mōtini. I declare the motion carried. So we will move on now to item B, the review of Class 4 gambling venue and board venue policy. It's on page 92 of your agenda. Angela's here to explain this one to us as well. Kia ora, Angela.
So we are talking about the review of our Class 4 gambling venue and board venue policy, which requires a review every 3 years. It's due this year. We're proposing to roll over this policy with no changes. The last review was done in 2021, and we implemented a sinking lid policy at that time. And this policy covers no consents approved for new gambling machines, no consents approved to increase the number of gambling machines in any Class 4 gambling venue, no Class 4 gambling venue or board venue consents can be transferred to a new location, and no consents approved for Class 4 gambling venue or board venue mergers. The object of the sinking lid policy is to reduce gambling harm by reducing the number of Class 4 gambling machines and venues over time. And since the last review in 2021, there have been no changes to the numbers of machines or venues. The next review will be in 2027. At that time, we will have 5 years of data to consider any effects of the sinking lid policy, any gambling trends, the distribution of grants from gambling profits, and any changes in gambling machine numbers and venues in Lower Hutt. That review will require a formal public consultation. So the next steps for this is if the committee agrees with this approach, it will go to council on the 1st of October for approval. And following that approval, the policy will be updated on our website, noting the effective date and date for the next review. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Any questions on this one? I think it's a pretty... Councillor Brown, is that your hand going up? Kia ora. Can we unmute her from this end? Are we able to do that? There you go, Councillor Brown. I think you're on now.
Apologies for that. My laptop wasn't working so well. The question I've got is 2 years not enough data to make a good assumption on the trends, and I still have questions around balancing gambling harm to which and to organisations applying for support. I would have thought 2 years would be enough to make some clear trends on gambling and the harm. Is 2 years not enough?
The data that we have shows that there have been no changes in venues and gambling machine numbers. And because of this, any change that we make to this policy, no matter how big or small, will require a full formal special consultative procedure. And we didn't really have anything to take to the public with no changes in numbers or venues. But in 5 years' time, we will have a lot more data to consider, a lot richer picture of what's happening.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would also just add to that when Council adopted the sinking lid policy and this approach, it is effectively a long-term strategy. So it's not something that's likely to bear fruit from a policy perspective over such a short period of time in 24 months. Therefore, it is wise to see the impact over a longer term of that approach, and if it is therefore effective or if it requires some change, so therefore a longer review period is appropriate.
Thank you.
You're good, Councillor Brown? Yep. If I could just quickly follow that up, Jared, a question for you, I guess, because the sinking lid policy is about as restrictive a policy as we can have, right? There's not a lot more we can do. We can't remove existing consents or anything like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my understanding is certainly the sinking lid in terms of the spectrum of interventions on the space is definitely at the more severe end of sort of the restrictions that council can put in place. There may be, and certainly would be advocates who would be arguing for some further tweaks, but it is very much at the pointier end of what we can do in this area.
Councillor Dyer had a question too.
Thank you. Do we know if anecdotally the policy is working? Obviously, the numbers haven't gone up, which is what we wanted to happen. But have we had like requests from people wanting to put in new machines and we've said, hey, sorry, no, you can't? Or do we know if...
The person who could answer that question has just gone. I don't know that we've received any applications. I know we wouldn't have approved any because we're not accepting any. So.
Yeah, if you could find out and send us through
Sure.
and link to member requests, that'd be really useful. It's obviously not really being considered as part of what we're discussing today, but I think it'd be useful to know.
Okay, are there any further questions? I can't see any in the room, in which case I'm going to move the recommendations on page 92. That the committee recommends to council notes the Gambling Act 2003 and the Racing Industry Act 2020 require Class 4 gambling venue and board venue policies to be reviewed every 3 years, attached as Appendix 1 to the report. Notes that Hutt City Council's Class 4 gambling venue and board venue policy was last reviewed in 2021 and a sinking lid policy was adopted. Number 3 notes that only 2 years of gambling machine and venue data has been collected since 2021 and no changes in the numbers of machines or venues were noted. Number 4 notes legislation allows for the Class 4 gambling venue and board venue policy to be rolled over if no amendments are proposed. And for number 5, I'll recommend option A, that we do agree to rolling over the existing Class 4 gambling venue and board venue policy with no changes. Could I have a seconder for those recommendations, please? Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Is there a debate? No. Oh, Councillor Stallinger.
Just briefly, I wasn't here at the time in 2021 and didn't really observe the debate, but I think the policy, as I see it, strikes a good balance, and I'd like to see the effect, over a longer period. Personally, I've observed from both sides, both as a treasurer of a sports club in years gone by, the struggle for funds just to keep the doors open, but also, seeing the harm at the other end of the spectrum when these machines in particular seem to strike an addiction with some people. So I'm happy to support the policy as it is, and hopefully over time we will see a reduction in harm in our community.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, it's definitely too early in the picture to see if it's had the intended consequence of, I guess the intention is to slowly bring the number down, but it's also, its intention is to stop the number getting worse. And if there's been even one inquiry to get a pokey gun in and it's not gone ahead because of this policy, then for me, this policy is doing exactly what it should be doing. So I think it would be quite useful to get any numbers we can on how many machines potentially haven't gone in because of this policy. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Parkin?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on Councillor Dyer's comment there. I would love to see it if we see that in the data, but I think we also need to remember that actually if people know that the policy is there, nobody's going to apply because they know that the policy it's going to be rejected, which actually, as we said, is doing its job, albeit slowly.
Yeah, I agree, and we certainly know those numbers can't go up. It might be interesting actually when we do get around to reviewing data to see what's happening in neighbouring councils. It may be that operators are moving into other places because they know they're more restricted here. If there's no further debate, I'll put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. He whakapuakio kua mana te mōtini. I declare the motion carried. Our next item is item C, the draft parking strategy. It's on page 102 of the agenda. I invite Martin Givoy, strategy advisor, and Paul Hewitt, head of transport, to join us and speak to that report. Kia ora kouroa.
Kia ora koutou, ko Martin ki voi toku ingoa.
Kia ora, Paul Hewitt, Head of Transport.
I've been leading the work to develop the draft parking strategy, working with Sam White, my colleague, and with Paul's people in the transport group. So firstly, thank you for Councillor Dyer for sending through some comments. Hopefully our response to those has made its way through the email system back to you. The parking strategy will replace the Parking Policy 2017. In developing the strategy, we adopted the NZTA recommended model, which is not only having a parking policy, which we will call a parking strategy, but having parking management plans. In other words, how do we make changes to parking management, having a little bit more discipline and structure applied to them. The draft parking strategy, as you've seen it, reflects best practice. We've gathered that from similar sized cities, Nelson, Hamilton, Tauranga, Dunedin, and we've also looked very closely at Wellington. The strategy that you've got has been reviewed externally by a transport consultancy, as well as the transport planners from Wellington and Hamilton. You were briefed on the development of the parking strategy in early July, and you agreed that we should go into engagement with stakeholder organisations in the community. So we've met with the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce, the mobility sector, emergency services, and particularly ambulance and fire, Metlink, Hutt Hospital, community boards, and developers. The approach in the draft parking strategy was broadly supported by all of these groups, and they're all keen to be involved in developing parking management plans. We did identify a bunch of issues that they were concerned about, and the first amongst those was concern about housing intensification and the pressure that's going to put on parking. The proposed introduction of paid parking at Metlink stations, the impact of Riverlink and the loss of parking there, and increased parking pressures at Hutt Hospital as they lose available footprint for parking on their premises. We also engage with key groups across Hutt City Council, so district planning, regulatory, transport, environment, urban planning, business and economy, and waste management. In other words, we went and talked broadly across council about this, because parking management plans are where the rubber hits the road, and developing parking management plans will require a really strong cross-council effort, probably through a project team approach led by the transport group. At this stage, we're proposing that 2 parking management plans be developed per annum, and the first of those would be rolling through early in 2025. Next steps, we're proposing a 2-week period of public consultation on Have Your Say, following the parking strategy being considered by full council on the 1st of October. So just to clarify, public consultation needs to be approved by full council, and so the 2-week period following the full council meeting allows us to run a public consultation on Have Your Say in order to enable us to bring the strategy back to you in this committee in mid-November. Hopefully then it will flow through into being adopted by full council in December. I just want to finish with a final note on engagement and consultation. Developing parking management plans will involve both processes. In other words, we need to engage with communities around identifying issues, gathering data, but there will also be public consultation on any proposals that a parking management plan then develops. So yes, engagement, understand the problem, gather the information, develop the solutions, consult on those, and allow the community to have their say on what is being proposed. That's my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know if you have anything to add, but no, thank you. Does any member have any questions? Just noting, I think the responses to Councillor Dyer's questions came through 6 minutes after we started the meeting. I don't know if he's had a chance to look at those yet. Does anyone have any other questions? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Just reading through those responses to Councillor Dyer, there was one there about you were going to clarify this in the draft strategy. Is that once it's finalised, or can you clarify it now? It was regards to warrant of fitnesses and things.
We've taken those comments on board and they will now be incorporated into the draft. That will go out for consultation and that will be included, obviously, next time round it comes back to this committee.
Thank you. I have a question, not about the wording of the draft, but about a figure which you may or may not know the answer to. It's mentioned in the strategy itself that parking management approaches an aim for 85% occupancy. That's kind of a sweet spot between there being enough car parks but not too many. Do you know what the figure is currently for the CBD?
Sorry, I can't tell you, but I'll ask Paul.
No, we don't have that figure.
It's not a test.
Immediately, yeah. We'd have to come back on.
Thank you. If you could come back with that, that would be great. Does anyone have any further questions? Brady, have you had a chance to look over those responses? Please let us know if you've got any further questions or suggestions.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of them are largely fixing some wording up, so it was good to get those through before the meeting. Did want to hear a bit more thoughts around the EV priority being high instead of being medium. The response said we propose high in line with Hutt City Council's emphasis on responding to climate change. My sort of thinking is putting EV car parks in the most optimum spot actually is having the reverse effect on climate change. If you need to charge your car, you'll park your car if it's on the other side of the car park or not. If you need to charge, you need to charge. But putting them in the absolute highest category, to me, means they're even more likely to get parked in by petrol vehicles, as is the case a lot at Fraser Park. They're the ones right next to the Fraser Park. They are often blocked. If you need to charge and the car parks were 10 spaces away from the front door, you're still going to park there and walk 10 spaces. So for me, having them in the highest category, we had the same conversation with Nino Pool. Obviously, the placement's a bit dictated there by the transformer and where that's gone, and it sounds like the conduit's already in place. But this is the policy that drives those decisions before they come to us. So for me, I would be more comfortable seeing EV in the medium, where it's still considered quite highly, but it's not the absolute, put it in the absolute prime spot when we're considering these things. But keen to hear your thoughts.
I'm really happy to be guided by you on that. I thought it was a moot point. It was kind of borderline. So happy to take your advice on that.
If I could go first, and then Councillor Parkin, just ask, since you've asked for guidance on that particular point. One thing I noted when reading it is that EV charging spaces is listed in hire currently. The next one down is customer parking for businesses, and I think the message that sends to our business community is that our city prioritises EVs over and above their business, and I don't know that that will land so well with our business community. I'd be more comfortable personally seeing EV down in the medium category alongside the business ones than being ranked so clearly above them. I don't know, other people may disagree. Councillor Parkin had a thought, I think.
Kia ora. Yeah, I would similarly agree, Chair, but my reasons are slightly different. What I am seeing is that if we designate EV parking and have too many of them, and do not allow other people to potentially use those spaces, we're actually generating a backlash against EVs. And while we are on an S-curve and rapidly increasing in EV users, and this will change very, very quickly over the next 5 years, probably would be my guesstimate on that one. We do have the next 3 or 4 years where we still have a relatively low pickup of EV users. Most people will charge at home, so the EV charging that we are looking at is what's classified as destination charges for most of the time. When you're talking about a rapid charger, by all means stick them where they're most useful, and that's almost always next to a power supply, because it is totally dictated to by the amount of volts and amps that you can get to the supply. But yeah, likewise with the other councillors, I don't think that putting it as a high priority is actually going to necessarily benefit where we are sitting at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Stillinger, is this about EVs as well while we're on the topic? Yep. Go for it.
Yeah, I won't repeat the comments already made. Councillor Brady had the same question I was going to ask, and really it was the only matter that raised my eyebrows through the strategy, which I think is a good one. The thought I had was ranking them alongside mobility parking spaces also doesn't seem quite right, because I would see those as being quite a higher priority than EVs. So thank you, other councillors, for raising that and just supporting that point of view.
Kia ora, thank you. If officers could just note that. Councillor Morgan.
Kia ora, yeah, thanks. I just also agree with the mobility parking spaces. And I just wonder, with this strategy, which is excellent, some great work going on there, around the disability car parks and things like that, would the strategy go beyond council so we could be linking with businesses? Because I think I get a lot of feedback that we're doing things right here. However, in certain areas in the city, the mobility car park or parking areas are not well designed actually. So does this have a flow-on effect that could impact the whole city and our businesses and working with them?
Can I just make some comments in response? Firstly, I should have clarified that small changes to parking management, for example, changes that might relate to 1 or 2 parks in specific places, will still occur and will still go through the normal transport resolution process. I would expect those to reflect I'd expect those to reflect our engagement, for example, in commercial areas with people, and to pick up the need for mobility where there might not be mobility parks currently. Just going back to the priority for EVs, your points are taken. Just wanted to say I think council has already moved strongly in the direction of supporting EV charging in its own facilities. Whether it needs to do that through a strategy more broadly through the city, your points are taken, and I think it could easily be in the medium category. And my last comment on that is changes proposed through a parking management plan would be up for debate. In other words, simply because it's reflected as a medium priority or a high priority in the strategy doesn't necessarily mean that when the parking management plan is developed, that would reflect that. There would still be engagement and consultation through the process of developing those parking management plans.
Thank you very much. Councillor Browns, got your hand up. Kerry, do you have a question? You're on mute currently.
I'll save it for comment because I think it's pretty much been answered, but I'll save for discussion.
Sure. Are there any further questions? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, there was discussion at the most recent traffic subcommittee meeting around potentially a shift of mobility parking spaces shifting to at all times. And I got the impression there was maybe some work happening on making the sort of BAU, any mobility park would be at all times. But the reading of the policy is a bit more ambiguous. It sort of says these designated parking spaces, there's opportunity to use them more effectively by allowing shared use based on the time of day. And then it says, for example, loading zones are useful for businesses during the day, but could be pickup zones in the evening. Completely agree with that with the loading zones, but it does have designated parking spots for mobility parking in this area, and that's one area where I don't think we should be tinkering with shared use. It should almost be, I think, in the strategy that mobility parks should be at all times everywhere. And as we come up for renewal on other works, that's just the way we do it. But keen to hear your thoughts if there's other work happening.
No, thank you, Councillor. Yes, the intention at the moment is to, subject to consultation, have the mobility parks citywide go through to at all times, and we'll seek to clarify that in this draft strategy.
Cool. So just your page 120 where it says designated parking and talks about mobility parking, bus stops and loading zones. If we could just make it really clear in there, the at all time for mobility, and then you definitely talk about the others and the flexibility of bus stops becoming taxi ranks and stuff, like more than comfortable with that, but mobility I think should always have its own separate category. We know from the responses we got with the 9.0 pool, I was overwhelmed by how many submissions there were on mobility car parks there. So yeah, I think it's something that we do need to address through here, but noting there'll be future work to come.
Okay, any further questions?
Yep, so
sorry.
Yeah, this is on page 121 under the time restrictions for rapid transactions, where it says where possible, P5s and P10s should not be used adjacent to cycle lanes in order to avoid potential accidents. It's been told to us before that we shouldn't be doing any P5s or any P10s anywhere in the city because we can't enforce them. Whereas this is sort of saying the application should be P5 or P10. So I just wonder whether we could clarify that as maybe saying P15s, or maybe keep it a bit broader and just say high turnover car parks, because I'm assuming loading zones would also fall into that category where you don't want a loading zone right next to a cycle lane with trucks pulling in and out of. So maybe keep it a bit broader and just change that specific P5 or P10 to just say high turnover car parking spaces aren't put next to cycleways.
Looking at my colleague, I think we're both nodding.
Yeah, we'll clarify that.
Happy to take your suggestion.
Okay, it looks like that's it for questions. Thank you very much, and for getting your written answers through to Councillor Dyer's early questions as well. So with questions done, I will move the motion that the committee recommends Council 1 receives and notes the report. 2, notes that feedback from engagement with key stakeholder groups is broadly supportive of the development of a parking strategy and parking management plans. 3, approves the draft parking strategy for public consultation from 3rd till 15th of October 2024 as attachment 1 to the report, just noting there will be some amendments based on comments today and in the feedback to Councillor Dyer. And number 4, notes that following public consultation, the final draft of the parking strategy will be considered by the committee at its meeting of 19th December 2024, before being recommended to Council at its meeting on 10th of December 2024. Mā wai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dyer, thank you very much. Is there any debate? We'll throw to you first, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, and thank you for the strategy. It is very good. Yeah, seeing it come to life more than a policy. There's something really flawed about the EV chargers. Where they've been put has currently, they do have priority, but that's not really the point. It's that in places, and Wainuiomata is one of them, we have lots of events where we have a shortage of car parking. That's not so bad, but for elderly, have a lot of elderly events. And here's these 8 empty EV charger car parks that are right up the front, right beside the facilities. And when people are parking in them, it's really just, it's flipped into parking for EVs, because they might sort of put, and people have told me they do it, they'll put the charger in, but the charging really should be done at home. So it's, to me, that's got a bit flawed, the way that we've set it out, the way that it is, and the accessibility, every other week watching the elderly, try and get into our Elders Day, and here's all the parks around the place that are sitting in priority places. So a rethink, even though EVs should hopefully grow, they're decreasing at the moment, but they need to grow. A little bit more thought needs to be, what's the behaviour we're pushing for with EVs?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any further comments? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
I'm supporting what Councillor Brown is saying as well. An example I've got, because the strategy is really good, but it is just getting it right for where there's a marriage of, or combination of mobility parking and EVs together. They restrict the mobility parks. A lot of big vans can go into mobility parks. An example is Moira car park. It's just restricted the access by having an EV right next to it. So I just think thought needs to go into these things. And it's all a learning process for us. This is a brand new thing, so I understand, but we need to get it right going forward.
Yeah, just a quick comment from me. I agree there's a lot of new stuff going on, and also we've had some pretty clear signals from recent decisions, including Nainai Pools car park, about what the community's thoughts are on these things, and I'm sure we'll hear more of it through this public consultation process. Just noting too, and it's in the strategy and in the commentary, the tension between public and private parking. And we don't have a lot of influence over private parking, but certainly we have an advisory role, I guess, and should use that where possible to promote best practice in private car parks for mobility car parking and things like that. The last point I wanted to make, and I probably could have made it earlier, but just to acknowledge the fact that this strategy has been peer reviewed by other councils. I thought that was a really smart move of us to go out and have some other councils have a look over our strategy, and hopefully they pinched all our good ideas and we got some of theirs in return. So thank you to the officers for doing that. Councillor Stounger.
It's just to say I'm very pleased to see this work progressing and is having now gotten to the stage. It's been a couple of times in the past where I've been nervous or even voted against a proposal to make a significant change to parking arrangements, mainly the charges, because this was yet to come, and I thought should have come before those changes. But I'm also conscious of the financial pressures which really led us towards those decisions. So great to see this progressing, and more power to it.
Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. Again, thank you, officers, for your work on this. And for me, when it comes to the engagement, I would just like to reiterate comments that I've already made in committee meetings. We are going to be talking about the disabled community in some of these parts of this consultation. No decisions should be made about the disabled community without their decision and their input. So it is vital within that engagement that we do that. I'm also reflecting on the EV challenge. We are still increasing in EVs. It's all right, Councillor Brown, it is going up still. But we do have a challenge here with psychology, and we need to be careful as to what patterns of behaviour we start off with at this point in time that we are setting up to continue later as the EV transition does continue to occur, and setting up good practice. And maybe that is that at the moment we don't have all of the EVs available, and that we retain that right to use them as EV-only slots later as things change and as the dynamics change. We've taken best practice, we've put in the charges where they need to be, running as shorter cables as we can, which is financially sustainable, and that naturally means that we end up placing the EV charges in the prime locations, as has been noted by a number of speakers. And yeah, we need to bear that in mind as we develop these policies.
Okay. If there's no further debate, I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. He whakapuaki au kua mana te mōtini, I declare those carried. Our next paper, number 7, is the Resident Satisfaction Survey Summary Report Insights. It's on page 132 of the agenda, and I invite Mike Knuth, Principal Advisor for Research Evaluation, and Jess Bromley, Engagement Advisor, to speak to the report. Tēnā kōrua.
Kia ora koutou. Nice to see everyone again. Councillors, you've received a paper from me on the results from the 2024 Resident Satisfaction Survey, alongside a report that provides more detailed survey insights. Because I've already briefed Council on survey results back in August, today I'll just touch upon some key survey results, and I'll end by speaking about what our next steps are with the survey. Jess is here with me because she led our engagement strategy for the survey, and can respond to any questions elected members may have about our engagement approach. So just for background, this year's survey was undertaken in a 5-week period across February and March, so just prior to the LTP. And during this period, we received just over 1,900 valid survey responses. Our survey population sample has balanced representation across wards, although the Northern Ward was slightly underrepresented. In terms of ethnic representation, we've had an increase in Māori participation this year, going up from 8% of last year's survey population sample to 15% this year. Māori make up between 18 and 19% of our population, so that's the benchmark, so we're getting closer to that now. We also attracted a slightly younger age demographic than previous years, with residents aged 35 to 44 being the most represented age group. That was very similar with LTP consultation this year as well. So just summarising key survey findings, the first thing that stands out is that residents are, in general, highly satisfied with council-maintained facilities, outdoor spaces, and with our curbside rubbish and recycling services. And survey results in these areas are typically at or very near our KPI targets. A second key insight is that residents evidently want a better understanding of how their feedback informs council decision-making. As you would have seen in my report, the survey identifies a general decline in resident satisfaction with council's communication and engagement. However, residents' comments make clear that this isn't really to do with not feeling consulted by council. It is more to do with feeling unclear about how council uses residents' feedback, including from the survey, to inform its decisions. Residents ask for greater transparency from council regarding how it utilises insights from surveys and other forms of engagement. In other words, residents appear to want a greater line of sight between key themes in resident feedback to council and what council has done to address any issues that have been raised. A third insight is that there appears to be a relationship between residents' uncertainty about how their feedback is utilised by council and survey results indicating a general decline in satisfaction with council decision-making. Resident feedback on council decision-making had a very similar theme to the feedback on council's comms and engagement, and indicates that a decline in confidence in council decision-making compared to last year or the year before owes in part to a perception that council typically invites community feedback without intending to act upon it. Regarding residents' perceptions of council as an organisation and of elected members, these are questions that we put in for the survey for the first time this year. Rates increases, infrastructure issues, and concern that resident feedback isn't often factored into decision-making were commonly cited by residents as having a negative impact. The fourth insight is that residents appear to generally have low levels of satisfaction with the transport and water infrastructure. And survey results show that we are far from meeting our KPI targets regarding resident satisfaction with transport and water infrastructure. That said, resident satisfaction with transport infrastructure this year has improved compared to last year, especially satisfaction with cycleways and shared paths. So that's a summary of the results and a bit of a background. In terms of next steps, since my team finalised the survey results last month, we've been quite active in sharing these results with business units across council, and we've been workshopping the results with them as well. So they can consider these for their own business planning and how they're going to take them into account. We've also asked business units for examples of how they've applied survey insights in the past, so last year and other years, and their efforts at business improvement. So we've been given a range of examples in the last couple of days, and we intend to include this information in a drafted press release before publishing survey results this month. So that's it in summary. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Jess, do you have anything to add before we go to questions?
No, just happy to answer any questions that I may have.
Kia ora. He pātai tōna member. Does any member have a question? I've got one. And it was mentioned in there, some really impressive results in terms of reaching people who are quite hard to reach in these surveys. I'll just mention one in particular, which was an almost doubling in participation by Māori. And there is in the paper a bunch of initiatives mentioned that we used there, but I wondered with that one in particular, Jess, is there anything in particular that you felt was resonating with Māori this time round to get them involved in the process?
Kia ora ana. Yeah, I think definitely going to the two events that we went to, Christmas in the Nui and Te Reo Kura, was hugely successful. You know, I mean, you can't beat that face-to-face kōrero with people. That really does make a huge difference. And I think, you know, beyond, a survey, just having that conversation and being there, listening as well. It was key to that. So yeah, definitely that made a huge impact. And I mean, like you said, and we can see the results really showed for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would also just add to that and absolutely echo Jess's comments in terms of the attendance at events. One of the things that we did this time round was targeted invitations to Māori on the Māori electoral roll. We know from engaging with other councils who've used similar strategies, they've seen a similar uptake in terms of engagement. So it's a very direct strategy to ensure we're effectively targeting that group.
Thank you. Any more questions, councillors? We have, I should have noted earlier on, been very well briefed on this. Thank you, Mike and the team, prior to now, if anyone out there is wondering why there aren't so many questions. But yeah, if there are no further questions, I will just thank you again for your mahi. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Lewis has one.
Thank you. Just on that comment from you, Mr. Griffiths, using the electoral roll, is that something we've done before in the past, or is that a first time, not just Māori roll? Have we used other rolls before?
Kia ora, thank you for the question. So over the last couple of years, we have used the electoral roll as the core sampling frame. However, this year is the first time that we've drawn data from the Māori electoral roll. And that was based upon, we did that based upon conversations held with other councils. For example, Porirua Council, about what has worked well for them in terms of engagement with Māori, and that was their recommendation. Yeah.
Councillor Stellinger.
It's been great to see the initiatives taken and that they have led to a more representative survey sample than we've had in the past. So that's great to see. I just have one question because, and I'm not suggesting we shouldn't move into these areas as we have done, but I do wonder whether if we are gathering respondents from those who are at events with groups who we connect with, as opposed to those who have little to no connection with us, whether we get a result which is somewhat distorted because of where people happen to be at the time, at a festival or already connecting with council. Again, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't do those things, but I just wonder, would that have any influence on the results, do you think?
Potentially, although truthfully it's hard to say. I think I can speak more broadly. However, that although we've done a lot better in terms of representation by ward, by Māori, even in terms of younger age demographics, a couple of things that remain consistent is that the majority of our survey respondents are homeowners, right? 84%. That's the same as last year. In addition to that, a higher proportion of our survey respondents come from households that earn $150,000 or over per year, okay? So what that suggests is that, yes, we are doing better engaging with Māori. We are doing better in terms of engaging residents in different wards. Nevertheless, there's still dare I say, a type of individual who is more likely to participate. Those are ratepayers, and those are people who live within high-earning households as well. And it's difficult for me to say that because we've tried really hard. We've tried really, really hard to ensure that we get balanced representation. And it's really important to us that all groups have a chance to have a say. But it is fair to say, and I think everyone here knows this, the survey method in itself is inherently limiting, okay? So it is efficient, it is cost effective, it does allow us to compare results year on year, but we need to face facts. How many people who, rangatahi, for example, or renters living in Taita have the interest or time to go through that and to answer those questions. And I think it's quite clearly evident in our survey responses that we continue to struggle to engage with them. So it does raise the question for me, and I know Jess and I have talked about it, and I have with others, about how do we supplement the survey method with other methods to better engage with other groups. And it's been said to me a few times by representatives of different ethnic groups, they prefer conversational style. They prefer someone in front of them and having that relationship. So looking forward, when we'll start strategizing next month for the next year's survey, I think we need to look very carefully at that. It's a bit harder in terms of time and analysing the data and reporting upon it, but to do it justice and to be fair to these groups, if that's the way they want to engage, that's the way we ought to do it. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up, if I can. Just that's response to the Nixon for discussions that every approach and try and gather survey information, there's always going to be not a clear match with a representative sample in all regards across the city, no matter how we do it, if it's on the phone, engaging. So I just accept there's been a great effort to improve things, so thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Parkin had a question.
Kia ora. So thank you for that considered answer, and this is a follow-up question from it. Porirua City Council, the Local Government Awards, spoke quite highly of their methodology of engagement, which was in video format instead of having to have a written submission. Is that something we would consider?
Possibly. I'm going to pass to Jess in a minute on that. I would just say that there's, obviously in Porirua's case, there's real value in that. Just keep in mind that it does take quite a bit of time to then, translate that and to code it. But again, I think we need to think about what our residents want to do and how they want to share their information. I'll just pass on to Jess to comment.
Kia ora. Yeah, I think what I will add to that is it will be key to look at other engagement methods beyond the survey, and just to back up what Mike has already said, we do hear that a lot of our other, particularly our ethnic communities, it is the conversation, it's the face-to-face. So, in the case that you're referring to in Porirua, using video, I think that's something that we definitely need to consider and keep in mind going forward.
Thank you. And just a comment from me, I think that one was for long-term plan submissions, which may have been in response to a couple of prompter questions, but collecting quite a different kind of open submission than this particular survey, but certainly something, so the technology itself well worth considering. Are there any further questions? No, in which case I will move the motion that the committee, one, notes that the 2024 resident satisfaction survey took place from 12th of February to 15th of March 2024. 2, notes the results of the resident satisfaction survey at Appendix 1, and 3, agrees to proactively release the survey results along with a press release which gives examples of how residents' views have historically been factored into decision making. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Is there any debate? We'll go Councillor Dyer and then Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to commend the team on an amazing effort, particularly engaging with those groups that when we last did this satisfaction survey that we highlighted were the ones we weren't hearing from, and the steps you've taken to actually get them on board, seeing those two graphs of what we know our population is with who we consulted with getting closer and closer together is really reassuring. That said, a lot of the actual data from the survey isn't trending in the best direction. Some are going up, some are going down. So for me, I'm really keen to know what's that next stage within the business teams at Hutt City Council on how we can actually try and turn some of these around. We know for a lot of them what the reasons are, particularly around water, Three Waters having such low targets, but for some of them around our sports fields or our museums, our libraries, really keen to see what the next steps are, that we don't just sort of put this onto the shelf and then next year around we do the next survey and it's trending down again. So really keen that we keep our finger on it and go from there. But yeah, huge thoughts for the amount of effort that's gone into getting more people on board and just the number of submissions as well. So, ka pai.
Councillor Morgan.
Kia ora. I just also wanted to thank the team. I think there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes, so much data and analysis, and the way it's presented, I would like to hope our community can really engage with that and see it and see themselves in it. And I think for me, and I think Jess, you've already talked about it in one of our more recent meetings about the rangatahi space, being sitting at 2%. I can't wait to see that shift, and I think it will, given that we've got, a person now who'll be in that space to work with you as a team collectively to see that diverse voice coming through once again. So just think, ngā mihi kia koro o kia koutou to all of you. Excellent work, fantastic, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I'm not sure if my hand was shown then, Councillor Mitchell. I just want to thank the staff that have done the survey this year, and the feedback that they just gave back is excellent. It's really highlighted the engagement part of it, not so much the results, but how we need to adapt to what is engagement for now and in the future. And it increasingly has shown that we need to go to the people, not that if we want diversity of views, we go to people who aren't, just doing that one form of submitting back. And I think that showed recently in Wainuiomata, we had a business and connections breakfast, and it was about engagement, and 90 people turned up, at 6:30 in the morning. So it shows that people will come if it's group for the right kaupapa, and you can get, and they were all surveyed while they were there. So that arrangement of how we engage with community, we're realising it needs to have, several different ways of looking through the lens. And, I really congratulate you for making those attempts in the different areas, and it's come up with good feedback and numbers. The results, for me, that's really no surprise, because every year that we're in council, it gets a bit more challenging and then a lot more challenging, and the infrastructure and the increase is frustrating people when they see that they're having to pay more out of their back pocket. And when we had that sharp change in keeping the waters and infrastructure with us. So I understand it, but it's still, nevertheless, getting out to get people's views is so important. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any further comments, councillors? I'll just make a brief one, actually, which and certainly support what's written in recommendation 3, the press release, giving examples of how residents' views have historically been factored into decision making. I think if we continue to hear that people are feeling unheard, it's not just this press release, but any opportunity we can take, I think, as things are brought to council and agenda papers, if that's been driven by what we've heard from our residents, tell us this has been driven partly by what we've heard from residents. And, every decision we make, if that's been driven by what our residents are telling us, good for them to know that that's part of our consideration or our decision-making factor. But yeah, just to echo everybody else, great work, team, and thank you so much. Okay, I will now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuaki au, kua mana te mōtini. I declare the motion carried. Okay, our next paper is number 8, Tō Tātou Taone 2055, Our City 2055. It's on page 191 of the agenda, and I invite Amy Prebble, Principal Advisor, City Strategy, to speak to the report. Kia ora, Amy.
Kia ora koutou, ko Amy Prebble toku ingoa. This paper is for your information and outlines the approach to developing Tō Tātou Taone, Our City 2055. This is our first paper to you on the city strategy, which has funding allocated through the long-term plan and will be drafted by June next year. Next week, between 200 and 300 people will come together at the Lower Hutt City Summit. There will be people from sports organisations, community groups, government agencies, mana whenua organisations, people from council and others coming together to talk about the future of our city. At the City Summit, we were asked the question, what can we do today that future generations will thank us for? And that's what a city strategy is all about. It's about stepping back and thinking about where are we now? Where have we come from? Where do we want to head to in the long-term future? And what steps do we need to take to get us there? Other cities around the world have developed strategies to set long-term direction, including New York, Melbourne, and Auckland, and we have reviewed these for best practice. A city strategy is different from other council strategies. It takes a long-term perspective, not 3 years, not even a 10-year long-term plan, but looks 30 years into the future. This is not a council strategy. While council will provide project leadership by resourcing and running the strategy, the final product will reflect the voices and aspirations of the people of Lower Hutt. A city strategy creates a common purpose and direction for long-term investment in the city. It enables the community and stakeholders to identify opportunities and address challenges that can't be tackled by any one party. We are not starting from a blank sheet of paper, but are drawing on the existing strategies and the work that has already been done by Council and other city partners. We're looking at the existing feedback that we just heard about from the resident satisfaction survey, feedback from long-term plans and other feedback. But we also need to fill the gaps, particularly on issues that don't necessarily sit with Council, like health, education, the environment. So an important aspect of this strategy is seeking community views so that people own the ideas that are included in the final document. Our priorities for engagement are working with mana whenua and partners in strategy development, engaging with key stakeholders, encouraging participation from our city's diverse communities. Events include the City Summit next week, creation of a city leadership group, regular updates to the mana whenua quarterly hui, key stakeholder interviews, and meeting with communities of interest. And there'll also be opportunities for public engagement on the draft strategy document. For Council, the city strategy will sharpen our focus on partnership and collaboration to achieve the best outcomes for our city, lifting our sights beyond purely council business and driving future plans. We will regularly update Policy, Finance and Strategy Committee throughout the city strategy development process, and the next update will be in November. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Amy, thank you very much. This is a very exciting project, and we've been well briefed on this one, but I'll just check if anybody has any questions. I just had one, and without wanting to get too far ahead of ourselves, that there's a 30-year horizon on this plan. Do we have an idea of how often it will be refreshed to keep it alive as a living document?
If it's doing its job well, then it will be reviewed regularly. And I think the idea of a city leadership group is evolving. But I would suspect that the members of the city leadership group would be taking away key initiatives and then coming back to assess whether they're on track. So I would see quite regular review against the strategy, but the exact time frame has not yet been determined.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would also just add to Amy's answer there that the implementation and sort of the ongoing monitoring of the strategy would form part of the project planning. So often, as Amy sort of indicates, there'll be something that will be required once this is finalised and moves into implementation of reporting against progress, our public communications to report against progress, and then there'd obviously be review timeframes that would need to be established sort of as we reach the implementation of the strategy as well.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No, in which case I will move the motion that the committee, 1, notes the approach to developing Tō Tātou Taone 2055, our city 2055, contained within the report. 2, notes the timeline for this project contained within the report. And 3, notes the Lower Hutt City Summit will be held on the 18th of September 2025, which will formally launch engagement on Tō Tātou Taone 2055, our city 2055. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Is there any debate? No, I will put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuakio kua mana te mōtini. I declare the motion carried. Our next paper, number 9, Standards and Poor's Credit Rating. Report. And firstly, Jenny, a big congratulations to you and the team on your recent award.
Thank you very much. Kia ora, everyone. Okay, so I'd like to just make some brief context comments about the paper, and then I'll talk to the Hutt City Council result. So Standard & Poor's visited us earlier in the year, and there were some key concerns that they talked to, particularly government policy uncertainty around the reform program for local government, water reform in particular, and then also the broader issue around funding of infrastructure and the limited revenue that we have in the sector. So there's 25 councils that are rated by Standard & Poor's, and 18 of them are sitting on a negative outlook. So you can read from that there's quite a few rating downgrades that are potentially going to happen. In paragraph 6 of the report, there's a little summary there of some of the recent downgrades that have happened. Porirua City Council downgraded to AA-, Horowhenua District Council down to A+, Bay of Plenty Regional Council down to AA-, and most recently on Friday we had Wellington City Council downgraded from a AA+ to a AA. So we're not alone in this world. There is an attachment to the report that summarises all the ratings of the different councils, and you'll see it's most of the councils are sitting in the AA range. And we just need to remember, a key comment from Standard & Poor's is that those AA ratings are actually really strong international credit ratings, so that's a good thing. In terms of the Hutt City Council result, we've moved from a AA to AA- and holding on to that negative outlook. And that rating change will not be a surprise to Council. We've highlighted it through the annual plan 23-24 and the LTP process that there was a high risk of a downgrade. In paragraph 11, there's some information around the impact on our borrowings because it will be more expensive for us to borrow, and we'll need to work through the process of the annual plan 25-26 to understand the impact and how we'll fund that change. On paragraph 13, there's some information, 6-year summary of all the different ratings we've had across the different criteria. And you can see in the most recent review, the financial management category and the budgetary performance ones were the key ones that moved unfavourably. And there's some lengthy content in the report explaining this. It is quite technical, so through paragraphs 15 and 16, got some content there from Standard & Poor's explaining it. I mean, basically the essence of it is they talk about, the big step up in our CapEx investment program has really driven up our debt levels. There's been increase in OPEX costs that we've had to deal with. And then, of course, we've got limited revenue streams and obviously rates affordability constraining that. I'll stop there and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. He pātai tō ngā mema. Does any member have a question? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, Chair. I have a question, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to answer it, given that it stems from information that we were provided at the Wellington Water briefing, which was done confidentially. I don't know if that information is now public. If anybody can answer that question first before I put my foot in it.
I can say that DIA has published a whole lot of information around like LGFA funding information and so on. They have published that on their website. So if you're referring to those aspects, then Okay.
Thank you. So in that case, I can ask that question. My understanding from that briefing was that they were looking at a double B rating for the new water entity. Just wondering how that's going to affect our city, given the projected outlook of the new entity, which will be a CCO.
So as we understand the water reform program, obviously it's early days, we're still working through options and so on, but potentially if there is a new regional CCO set up for Wellington area, that CCO would have a guarantee from the councils that are shareholding councils. So there could be flow-on impacts to the council's credit rating as a result of that. The CCO would also be assessed for its credit rating. Obviously, at this stage, it's unclear what the rating would be. They are talking about the B range. So yeah, early days. And I mean, overall, what could potentially happen is a lot more debt loaded up into that CCO, the water entity, so that it can get on and deliver the water program. So we could see across the council group and the CCO potentially a overall movement down in our credit ratings and higher cost of borrowings as well. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Any further questions? I was going to ask you to crystal ball gaze, Jenny, about what impact that would have on our council, but I know it's very complicated and probably not worth asking at this stage. I did have one just minor detail question. On page 202 of the report, where Standard & Poor's explained why they lowered council's financial management from being strong to average, paragraph 2D, the final statement in there, we also considered multiple increases to debt limits in recent years that have allowed deficits and debt levels to rise rapidly. I don't recall multiple increases to debt limits. Are they merely discussing that our debt is rising, do you think?
Yeah, the financial strategy over the last few TPs has lifted revenue.
Are there any other further questions from members? No, in that case, I'll move the motion. It's short and sweet that the committee receives and notes the report. Mā wai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Is there any debate? Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. You brushed over it at the very start, but I did want to acknowledge the finance team for winning Best Finance Team of the Year award in the New Zealand CFO Awards. I was kind of expecting you to bring it to the table and have it sitting there proudly I expect that for the next meeting. But no, just a huge congratulations to the team for their outstanding work.
Thank you, team. Well done. Any further debate? No. I will now put the motion, which has been moved in second. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Ka whakapua ki au, kua mana te mōtini, I declare the motion carried. Over the page, item number 10, submission on the redesign of the Vocational Education and Training Scheme. It's on page 212 of the agenda. I invite James Lamb, Head of Business and Economy, to speak to the report.
Institutes and polytechnics to make them standalone or be federated nationally. Gave us some options for industry training and standard settings and outlined or asked for feedback on funding. We attended their session held at Welltech with good number of community representatives. And in creating a submission, we have had input from mana whenua and the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce. Those mana whenua have had a long-standing partnership with Welltech and Whirirea, and Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce have had some success of late working regionally to provide new programs. So this submission is in their words as well as ours. So today, your opportunity is to endorse this and advocate for decisions around delivery being made locally to match local need. And that also obviously matches our local investment we're making, which is quite significant. So today, really just looking for your endorsement, and we'll take this submission through to them on Thursday.
Thank you, James. He pātai tō ngā mema. Does any member have a question? No. In that case, I will move the motion that the committee, 1, receives and notes the report, 2, approves the joint submission regarding the proposed changes to the vocational education and training system attached as Appendix 1 to the report, and 3 notes that the consultation closes on the 12th of September 2024. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Lewis. Is there any debate? We'll go Deputy Mayor Lewis and then over to Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the submitters who've put this together. It's a very good read. It justifies why we need the organisation here to work as a community like they already have been doing and to continue that work. And I think it can only grow if we keep up. And yeah, so let's hope that there's a good result from the submission that goes in. It's a very good submission.
Just to echo those words, great to see Council and iwi and Chamber of Commerce working together on a joint submission, and it's reflected in the quality of the submission and the things that we particularly want to see training in on page 220 with our big infrastructure and capital investment program coming up. It's just the sort of priority that that should be emphasised. So, yeah, congratulations on this submission.
Thank you. Just a closing comment from me, and it echoes the other ones that have already been made. Quite a huge list of people involved in this submission. Really great to see the teamwork from our council, not just with iwi partners, but with the Chamber of Commerce as well. And also to acknowledge, I guess, that the Polytechs and ITS in here are also part of our bigger team in the Hutt Valley delivering this mahi. So thank you for the very thoughtful and considered submission. And I know there was a lot of input from our mana whenua partners and the Chamber as well. So thanks also to them. Okay, I will now put the motion which has been moved and second. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuakio, kua mana te mōtini. I declare the motion carried. Moving on to our information item, number 12, the Policy, Finance and Strategy Committee Forward Programme, page 226 of your agenda. He pātai tō ngā mema. Does anyone have a question about the Forward Programme? No. In that case, I move the motion that the committee receives and notes the draft Forward Programme for 2024 attached as Appendix 1 to the memorandum. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Stallinger. I will now put the motion which has been moved and second. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuakio, kua mana te mōtini. I declare the motion carried. Item number 13 is questions. I have received no questions, and we're going to adjourn the meeting now. Members will move into private deliberations on the Control of Alcohol in Public Places bylaw. The committee's decision will be released as soon as possible and will be considered at the council meeting on 1 October 2024. But before we begin those deliberations too, I think we should probably take a break. 5:10. 5:10. Any advice?